Hello, my name is Diane, and today I want to talk about the best books I read in 2024. I am still reading some books that honestly might bump some of these down because I'm really enjoying all of the books that I'm currently in the middle of, but all I can talk about is the ones that I have finished. So I have 5 books today. Unfortunately, one of them is a standalone, one of them is a series conclusion, and the other 3 are book 2 in a trilogy. So for most of them, I'm just going to talk about the series overall rather than the specific synopsis of each of those books, just for the sake of spoilers. If these series sound interesting and you haven't started them, I don't want to ruin book 1 by telling you how great book 2 was. So that being said, I'm going to start with the standalone, which is A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. This is a story about a young girl whose mother is a sorceress, and her mother is a terrible person. She takes advantage of men as her benefactors, and when she's done with them, or they are no longer useful for whatever reason, if they've slighted her, she does something terrible to them, either ruins their life or kills them. Her next target is this wealthy squire, and she has decided she's going to woo him and become his wife and then live off of his fortune. And as that starts off, we also meet the squire's sister, and she is the other point of view we follow, and she just gets a bad feeling about this woman from the beginning when they meet, and she has decided she needs to find some way to figure out what exactly is bad about this woman and hopefully stop her from marrying her brother. So the daughter and the sister end up working together. I really like their relationship. I really like both of their characters, particularly the sister, but we also see some pretty heavier things with the daughter in dealing with the manipulation and the abuse of her mother, in trying to trust these people and that she has come to care about and find a way to protect them from her mother. So we do see some heavier things happening in this book, but I feel like it never feels too dark, even though there are some pretty horrifying, messed up things that happen within this book. I don't feel like the tone ever gets too much. The characterizations and the relationships between them, I think, really balance all of those other things out in the way that they help one another and overcome things, or at least try to. I wasn't quite sure what to expect when I went into this, but I really loved the story that I got. The next book is the conclusion to a trilogy, and that is The Slain Divine by David Dalglish. This is the 3rd and final book in the Vagrant Gods trilogy, and this series primarily we follow a prince who is the prince of this island nation, and they're invaded by an empire, and the empire kills their gods and also the royal family. However, the prince survives and is taken in by this group who are planning to eventually revolt and take back their home. The magic system within this world is based around those gods, so the gods gain power based on how much faith and prayer the people have for them, and in turn the gods are able to grant favors and basically perform miracles for their people. They can give select people powers if they are devoted enough to them. I think it's a really cool magic system, and I really liked the characters within this book. We do follow a bunch of point of view characters, and I feel like they all had pretty distinct voices and characterizations. I really liked seeing their individual journeys within what was happening in the overall plot of this. I just really enjoyed getting to see this world, getting to know these characters and see what they go through. I feel like the action was pretty well written, in that I never felt very confused during any fight scenes about what was going on and where anyone was. And I felt really invested in the plot and everything between this island nation, this group of rebels, and the empire that had taken over them, and the different gods that are vying for power and also have relationships with one another. Just thought this was a really cool, interesting series, and I found it very immersive, very easy to just dive into the world and the characters' heads. And I had a lot of fun with this. Definitely recommend this series. The next book is Le Fay by Sophie Keach. This is the sequel to Morgan Is My Name. I feel like I've talked about this book a lot. I don't know if that's true or if I just think about it a lot. I think if I had to pick my favorite book of the year, it probably would be Le Fay. I just really love the way that this story is written. It's so compelling. I love this characterization of Morgan. This is an Arthurian retelling of the character of Morgan and her life from a young girl when Uther Pendragon enters her family's lives in leading up to her as an adult. The first book, we see her go from being a child up until her adulthood and having her own family. And then the second book picks up where that one basically left off. And I just find it so engaging. There are some things that I mean, it's a retelling, so if you know the life of Morgan at all, you probably know the main plot points that are coming. So I think it is predictable in that way, but I still find it so interesting to see Sophie Keach's take on this character and the specifics that she's put in to really flesh out Morgan as a character and how she weaves all the plot points together. And that even some of the things that I don't know about Morgan from just general Arthurian legend, I feel like I could kind of guess them, but I was still so engaged in seeing them play out and seeing exactly what was going to happen, how it was going to affect Morgan and the people around her. And I've really loved both the first book and this book, and I'm definitely looking forward to the third book and seeing what Morgan ends up doing next, and if she eventually finds her happy ending while maintaining the independence that she so very much strives for. The next book is The Truth of the Aleke by Moses Osiotomi. This is the sequel to The Lies of the Ajungo. This is a novella trilogy. This is the second book in that trilogy. And it takes place in this desert where there are cities within it, but they're pretty spread out. They're pretty isolated within themselves. In the first book, we see a young boy who ventures out into the world for the first time, and all of the things that he learns about the world and how those differ from what he was taught about the world. And in this one, we go through a similar journey, but we're seeing a new character 100 years later who has grown up in a city and ends up going and meeting other people pretty similarly and learning other things about the world, the history that he knows about the world, and also his place within it. And I don't really read a ton of novellas or short stories. I just find that they're typically more difficult, especially in a fantasy setting, to really flesh out the world. The characters make them more believable and not just very flat characterization. And also to have a very compelling plot that feels satisfying and complete. And I feel like Moses Osiotomi really hits all those marks in that I felt like this world has a lot going on, even though we only see one character's small part of their life within it. I feel like that character goes through a satisfying change throughout the story, and just the writing in general I find to be very compelling in that I want to keep reading it, and because it's so short, it's very easy to do that. And I just feel like in such a small space, he puts together such a satisfying and compelling story that I just really enjoy. I'm not really sure what we're going to get in the third book. I would assume another character, but who knows when and where it's going to take place and how it's going to tie into everything that we already know from the first two books. But I'm definitely looking forward to continuing the series, and I've really been enjoying it so far. And the last book I want to talk about is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett. This is the second book in the Emily Wilde series, the first book being Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This is one book that I was very pleasantly surprised that it did live up to the hype. I felt like everyone was talking about this series when it came out, both the first book and the second book. And I'm not a big fae fan in general. It's just not something that's super appealing to me. I don't really like or dislike it in general, but it's not a selling point to me. So I wasn't really expecting a whole lot when I went into that first book, and I ended up really loving it. I love the character of Emily. She is this scholar who's not super personable. She doesn't really have a ton of charisma. She means well, but she mostly just wants to do her research and put together her studies. And in researching fae, she winds up in trouble, as everyone does when they get involved with the Fae. So the first book we see her studying this very elusive type of Fae. There are different Fae within her world. And then in the second one, she is trying to map out all of the doorways and portals to the fairy realm. She, of course, gets into trouble in dealing with the fairies, and also just some of her personal relations develop as we go. I just think these stories are a lot of fun. I actually think the second book I enjoyed more than the first book, which I think is pretty unusual. But I feel like this one just took everything that I liked about the first book and did it more and did it even better. So this series was a very pleasant surprise for me, and it has continued to be so. So I'm definitely looking forward to the conclusion of this. So that's all for me today. Let me know what your best reads of 2024 were. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.